Hello everybody, this is Roger from Roger's Reviews. Get this camera right here. Today we're going to be talking about starting a tree service in 2020. I've started a couple different businesses. I started a tree service almost 20 years ago, and I did it very slowly and had very little income, very little investment when I first started. I worked another job and saved enough money to buy equipment, and I was working different jobs, and I also had a small landscape company, and I slowly transitioned over to doing tree work. And I wrote a little list of things that I might have done a little differently, or basically these are kind of like trade secrets that if you're starting a tree service, there's a couple little trade secrets that might help you out immensely. I wish I had this list when I started. And when you don't have any money, you kind of get creative and you basically figure these things out. But it would be nice to have somebody tell you before you start. Like I said, if you're starting a tree service and you don't have a lot of money to invest, or nobody's helping you invest, and you have to basically come up with all the money on your own, a lot of people make the mistake and buy the wrong equipment, and they basically deplete all their cash, or deplete everything they have, their monies, so they usually end up going out of business or having a really hard time. So normally when you have a tree service, I started out with like a minivan and a trailer, but it just depends on what you already have. You don't want to go out and buy a bunch of equipment and have a bunch of loans to start with, unless you have a great big, if you, I guess, inherit a tree service, or you just have like a storm comes in and basically you get lucky and you start off with a bunch of cash flow. But normally, if you just start out in a regular time, of course, tree work is seasonal, so usually it starts when people start getting their taxes in. So if you're going to start a tree service, don't start in the wintertime, especially down here south in Florida, because there's about 3 or 4 months that are kind of slow, and then after you develop your business, that it gets shorter and shorter because you have return customers that kind of bring you through the slow times. But the first thing I would do, if I didn't have a truck, I would have an older truck. I started out with a Toyota T100, which is a 4-cylinder 5-speed, and it's a very small truck. But it gets very good gas mileage, and you're able to, haul a little bit of debris with a small trailer. And what I would encourage is the second purchase would be, if you can't afford a dump trailer as a small trailer. But like I said, I was able to get the dump trailer. I think that was my third or fourth purchase, and it really helped me out. Because what you want to do is you want to be able to do the small jobs on your own, and being able to have a dump trailer and dump the debris at a local landfill, or be able to just dump logs, it's going to help you out immensely. The third or fourth thing you should get would be a small mini skid steer or a used Bobcat. I ended up getting a Toro Dingo, which helps depending on what type of truck you have and what type of trailer you have. If you're just starting out and you have a small truck and you have like a landscape trailer, you can actually pull a small compact loader with a small truck and a small landscape trailer. A compact loader weighs about 3,000 pounds. Anywhere from 3,000 to 4,000 or 5,000, depending on which model you get and what attachments you have. I recommend the Ditch Witch. I've had them for years, and they're very dependable. Another machine I've had is a Toro Dingo, which you can get a little bit for a little bit less money. But if you watch my other videos, I normally recommend the gas-powered Toro Dingo. The diesel ones had a few heating problems. So one of the first things to get, of course, you always should have your, this is after you buy your chainsaws. You should have a medium saw, which is like a 250, 18 inch, 16 to 18 inch bar. You should also have a larger saw with a 24 to 32 inch bar, and then of course your climbing hardware, climbing saddle, ropes, and your climbing saw. And I also recommend the steel climbing saw and the steel pole saw, extended pole saw. So if you want to get started, and I started off with just anything I could find, but if you have the money, I would invest in about 3 or 4 steel saws. I would have a pole saw, extended pole saw, a 250, like at least 16 to 8 inch bar ground saw, and the top handle saw, and maybe one larger saw that can go up to I would say at least a 24 inch bar. Really a 32 would be preferable, because a 32 inch bar you can do like 90% of your work. If you can't cut it down with a 32 inch bar, you probably shouldn't be doing it when you're first starting, because most of your bigger tree work, a lot of times it's underbid, so you're gonna have a harder time making money doing the bigger tree work, because everything's gonna have to be subbed out. So once your phone starts ringing, if you don't have a secretary, or if you don't have anybody answer your phone, as soon as you can afford it, I would recommend getting an answering service. And some of the answering services start out at under $100 a month, but it really helps you out, because if you're a sole proprietor and you're answering the phones, it's really hard to answer the phones and get back with people immediately. If you have an answering service, it makes your company look bigger, and people like to talk to other people. They don't like to talk to answering systems. A lot of times you miss calls if a person doesn't answer. If there's a voicemail, a lot of times people hang up rather than leave a message. If you have an answering service, people are less likely to hang up, so you have a higher percentage of getting your calls. That's one of the best things I ever did, was get an answering service. And like I said, it's I had a secretary, and we ended up getting rid of the secretary because we really didn't have a lot of office work to do. So the answering service kind of basically took care of all the calls, and it freed up a lot of time, and it kind of eliminated most of the work of the secretary, because that was one of the main jobs, is answering phones and returning phone calls and taking messages. What's nice about an answering service is they not only do they answer the call, but they can send you a text message, and they can send you an email to be retrieved later on, and they can send out multiple texts. So you can get a text, your salesman can get a text, and whoever else you choose. So that way, if the salesman can't get to it, if he's busy, a lot of times you can have a secondary person like the owner, or maybe even another person on staff that can return the phone call. Another thing nice is you can get an email, so you can print those emails out and you can refer to them, and you can follow up and make sure that they were contacted. So you can print those out and keep them in a file, so you have basically a list of all the people that were interested, and you always refer back to. Also, too, when you have an answering service, they read from a script. So the customers will always hear the exact same message. Our message is, thank you for calling Tree Life Tree Service. What is your tree concern today? And also too, we go out on a limb for you. So every time someone calls, it's exactly the same message, and we also find out the name, address, phone number, and why they're calling and how they heard about us, which is very important. Sometimes it's hard to do that when different people are answering the phones. They don't always ask the right questions, and those are very important questions that need to be asked, and those answers need to be recorded so you can refer back to, and that way you know, like when you're advertising, where your advertising dollars, or you're getting a return on your advertising, because if you're getting most of your calls from Google, that's where you want to invest your money. If you're getting most of your calls from like your other ads, some people still, believe it or not, use phone books. If in the tree service you have older clientele, people that have owned their own homes for a while, and they're retired, and sometimes they still use the phone book. So I know this is kind of ridiculous. People don't really believe that people still use the phone book, but a good scenario is when the power goes out and your phone doesn't work. Some people actually still have phone lines, and if your cell phone doesn't work, they're going to go to a landline. Say their tree falls across their driveway. They don't want to be stuck. There could be a medical emergency. They're going to use their phone line, open the phone book with a flashlight or whatever, and basically call a couple tree services out of the phone book. And the first one to respond is usually going to get the work. So I know it sounds crazy, but it's happened to me quite a few times. When you're a small business, you don't want to. One of the last things you're going to buy is a crane, a bucket truck, and of course a grapple crane. But you would be surprised, the new grapple cranes that come out, they're not much more than a crane. So it's going to eliminate the climber, and it's going to eliminate a lot of people. So even if you're a small business, you can still do crane work. You just basically subcontract somebody with a grapple saw in your area. Hopefully you have one, and it's going to eliminate having employees. You can have like maybe 2 or 3 guys, and call in a grapple saw. They can basically do most of the work, pick up the material, and set it right in the road, or set it somewhere where you can grab it. That's where the compact loader comes in. And if you have a compact loader, you want to make sure you have a grapple bucket, and you want to make sure you have a platform to stand on, because if you don't have a grapple bucket, the loader is almost useless. And if you don't have a platform to stand on, you have no counterweight. So it makes a huge difference if you can stand on it, because like most people weigh 150, 200 pounds. That's a lot of counterweight, and it's going to be able to pick up a lot more material when you're standing on the back of it. And also, too, if you have bigger material, you can have a couple guys stand on it, and you can pick up that last couple big logs, and at least be able to move them to an area where a grapple truck can pick them up. Another thing is temp service. When you first get started, you can't afford to have a bunch of people on staff. So maybe even you might be working another job, or just starting your tree service, and you can't afford to hire somebody full time to basically be waiting for you to get a tree job. So another excellent way to have help when you need it is get familiar with the owner of a temp service in your area, and because you're going to need them in the future as well. But you can hire people for $10 to $15 an hour to finish your tree job. So you might be able to start it or get it to a certain level, but there's so much hands-on work that you're going to need help raking, blowing, cleaning up the job site. So a lot of times when I first started, I would get a few people to help me at the end of the job, like the last. That's another thing. You don't have to have them, like if a crane's there, grapple crane's there, you don't really need them right away. You need them at the end of the job site. You'll have 2 or 3 people need to rake and blow and get cleaned up. So get familiar with who owns or the manager of the temp service, because later on, even if you have full-time employees, if you don't want to spend the money for workers' comp and insurance, then you can't hire people for 40 hours a week. You can get them through a temp service, and you can hire them just when you need them. Even if you're 20 or 30 hours a week. That way, the temp service can cover them for workers' comp and your liability insurance. So basically, you're totally legit. You're covered 100%, and you don't have to worry about paying your workers' comp every week, even if you're not working. So that's another good tip. The first thing you want to do also too is get on with Google and Yelp and all these online services, because most of our customers now do a search, and they search for the tree services near them. And if you're not on Google, there's a pretty good chance you won't get called. Another thing I did when I first started is I found out about a Magic Jack. Magic Jack is started out was like basically a phone line that you could basically have if you had internet. And a lot of people were using them overseas, but a lot of people, especially businesses, they don't have landlines anymore. It's just too expensive, and nobody really uses a landline, but it's nice to have if they're inexpensive. So that's where Magic Jack comes in. Magic Jack can be bought online, magicjack.com. It can be bought at Walmart, a lot of, like electronic stores. And basically what it is a little device that you plug in a USB, like in your computer. And sometimes now you don't even have to have a computer. It could be a standalone. As long as you have internet, basically it creates a phone number, and you can plug in a landline phone to it, and you make phone calls in and out. And it has built-in voicemail and all that stuff, and call forwarding is all combined. And if you basically get it in time, you can also, for like an extra $10 a month or $15 a year, you can choose a vanity number. And sometimes you can get a number in your area that has your business in it, like 584 tree or 584 weld or 222 tree, depending on if someone's got it or not. So you can actually have a number that reflects your business. So that is a really good, excellent way to get a number and have an extra phone line for your business. It's great to have one for your office as well. So check into the Magic Jack. It's a really good little device that will help you keep your expenses down, because you can buy them at Walmart. I think they're like $39.95, and then it's like $10 or $15 a year, and then it's like an extra $10 to keep your vanity number. And I just buy it like 5 years in advance. For like $50 to $75, you can have your own phone number, your own phone line for 5 years. And that's usually what you pay in a month or two having a regular phone line. Also, too, you want to join a network marketing group in your area. I belong to 3 of them, and basically a network marketing group or a marketing group, like I belong to BizNet. There's about 60 small business owners, and a lot of them are mom and pops or under 10 employees, and we meet every week in the morning, like once a week, have breakfast, and everybody basically goes over their spiel, what they do, what type of service they have, what they offer. And if you're in the right group, some groups only have one specific trade in the group. Like you can only have one tree service, you have one plumber, you have one lawyer, you have one electrician, and that's a good group to be in, especially if it's in your local area, because you're not going to have any competition in that group. And if that group, like you have realtors, you have roofers, you have plumbers, you have handymen, and landscape people, those are the people you want to get close to, because landscapers are usually the ones that find the dead trees, or the homeowner tells first, hey, beware of this tree, or anybody that's can take this tree down or grind this stump out. Roofers as well, because a lot of times when you're replacing a roof or doing repairs, you want to get the trees away from the house before you do the roof. You don't want to, put a new roof on and have to trim trees or remove a tree over your house. So a lot of times, if people are thinking, especially if you're on the same page as your roofer, they'll call you first and say, hey, I have a referral for you. We're putting a new roof on. Please take care of all these trees, get everything trimmed away, and it'll be easier for us to go in and put the roof in, and it'll last longer. Also, fencing people. Fencing people a lot of times don't have stump grinders. They don't have a lot of equipment to clear the way for putting in fence. So if you have a fence guy, he needs the area cleaned out to make it easier for him, grind some stumps out. He'll give you a call and be like, hey, I have a referral. I'd appreciate if you go ahead of me, take care of this, and make it easier for my guys to go through and put this fence up. And vice versa. Like if you break a fence or you put a hole in something drops in a roof, you have a referral. You can call these people and they'll take care of you, and they'll be able to do it more cost effectively. They're not going to gouge you, because they know later on that you're going to return the favor and give them work. So, one hand, takes care of the other. You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So please, if you're really serious about it, get involved in a small networking group in your area. If you're another thing, if when you first get started, even at any time, you need to find out about workers' comp exemption form. And here in Florida, it's free, because it's we're not construction. Non-construction is free. So basically, find out where to apply. It's called your workers' comp exemption form. It lasts for 2 years. Every 2 years, you have to renew it. And it'll save you a lot of headaches, because if you're workers' comp exempt, you can have 2 or 3 people working with you, and you don't have to have workers' comp. But what I recommend is be workers' comp exempt yourself, your owner, and then that way, if there's someone shows up on the job, you hire someone temporary, someone helps you, basically you're covered. You're not going to be getting in trouble just by having someone help you for a day or two. If you have anybody that helps you consistently, if like an employee, and you don't have enough funds to get workers' comp and get covered, send them down to your local temporary service and hire them through your temp service. And that's why I tell you, get familiar with the manager of your temp service, maybe 1 or 2 in your area, and the owner of the temp service, because you can give them a quick phone call, say, listen, I'm sending one of my guys down there. Can you take care of them? They'll take care of it. They'll get all your insurance, your workers' comp taken care of, and then you'll be totally legit. If anything happens, you'll be covered. Most important thing, you want to be covered. You want to save your butt. So whenever someone comes on your job site, you always want to have workers' comp on them. On yourself, you can get away with workers' comp exemption, but on anybody else, anybody but yourself, the owner, you want to send them down the temp service, because the tree service is one of the most dangerous jobs in the world. I've seen a lot of stuff happen, and it's always that one time you think nothing's going to happen, and that one mistake can cost you your everything. One mistake. You can work for 10 years, have no problems. You let one person on your job site, that one time something happens, all those 10 years are down the drain. So just take my word. Make sure everybody's covered on workers' comp, not excluding yourself. That's one thing. You can even hire yourself through the temp service and be covered, which is a lot of times what we do. But you definitely want to have whoever's on the job site, you want to have them go down and work through the temp service if you can't hire them directly. That way, from day one, they're covered. And then if you ever get audited, When they come out, all you do is say, hey, we work for the temp service. You hand them the information. They make a few phone calls. You're covered. You also want to get at least $500,000 or $1 million worth of coverage. We have $2 million. And sometimes, like if you're working for like a mall or a big corporation, you want to have $5 million worth of liability insurance, umbrella policy. Okay, I know that's kind of a lot, but you can go over it a few times. The next thing I would do is if your family or somebody you know has some property, you need at least like almost an acre to 3 to 5 acres. And this is going to be your transition spot, because sometimes you're going to have debris and you're not going to be able to basically dispose of it right after the job. Say you're doing it on a weekend and you need an area to either hold it or park your vehicles, and if you can't afford commercial property, which you're going to need eventually, you're going to have a piece of farm property or something where if you park your equipment, especially logs or debris, nobody's going to complain. If you have maybe a friend or relative that you can store equipment at, or basically dump debris for a short period of time so you can transition. Like on a weekend, you can dump the material there, and then Monday morning you have a truck come in and pick it up. I recommend that you make some friends who have some acreage, and especially like farmland or something in the rural area where people are used to seeing debris and stuff laying on the ground, and they're not going to call the city or anybody to complain, because that's just one more headache you don't need. Okay, if you do get a piece of property, make sure it's commercial or can be zoned commercial. You're going to need at least, don't get anything under an acre, because you're going to outgrow it very quickly. I recommend like about 3 acres, because that way you have room for park your equipment, you have room to eventually build a barn to store your equipment, and you're going to need an area at least a 1/4 acre or 1/3 of an acre to dump material and to be picked up. Like I said, if you're a busy tree service, when you pick up material, sometimes you can't always go to the dump, and it's going to save you money if you can basically do 2 or 3 jobs, dump it in one area, and have a loader truck come and pick it up and take it to the dump. And I did that for years. I would do smaller jobs and combine my debris, and then that way I'd hire a truck to come and pick it all up at once. Because if you don't have a loader truck or a way to haul a lot of material, it's going to be very expensive to have a loader truck come to every single job, even if it's small, and pick up each job, because it doesn't matter if you have 1 log or a full load, it's the same price, and these prices keep going up. They used to be like $250, and now they're over like close to $500 or over $500 for 1 truck to come and pick up debris. So I started out with just hauling stuff away on a trailer, and then I got a dump trailer, and I got a bigger dump trailer, and then eventually I bought a loader truck. But you can't always do that, because sometimes loader trucks, even the cheapest one, you're talking way over $10,000, anywhere from $10,000 to $25,000 just for a basic running loader truck. And you'll be lucky if you find one for that price that's reliable. So when I first started, what we did was we would call in a service, which was only $250 at the time, and if we had too much material we couldn't haul away at one time, we would call a loader truck in. And like I said, that's one of the last pieces of equipment you're going to get, because they're expensive, and then a lot of times you have to have a CDL driver to drive them. But you need a piece of property where you can do smaller jobs, and you can combine 2 or 3 jobs, so that way you can only have to pay 1 loader truck to pick up all the material. After about 2 or 3 years, I bought a small chipper. The first thing I bought, as far as equipment-wise, was a small stump grinder, and then I bought a small chipper. Because what you want to do, especially when you first start out, the smaller jobs, you want to basically try to do everything yourself. You can grind the small stumps. If you have a small chipper, you can chip up the small debris and the branches, and eliminates on dump fees, because a lot of times you can dump chips for free, or sometimes you'll find a person that'll take a lot of chips. You can dump chips for a long time and not have to pay, or sometimes even sell the chips. Or if you have a piece of property, you can dump them and spread them out, and it'll basically decompose. So that's another good thing you can do. And you can get a small stump grinder probably for around $5,000, and you can do probably 75 to 80% of your stumps, maybe 90% of your stumps, and just subcontract the bigger stumps out. Because if you keep doing big stumps with a small stump grinder, you're going to wear it out and you're going to tear it up, and really it's going to take you forever to grind a big stump with a small stump grinder. So I recommend subbing out your bigger stumps, and I would stay away from bigger trees when you first get started, because even now today I try to stay away from bigger trees because it ties you up too long. And unless you have a big crane coming in or a grapple saw and can get the job done quickly and efficiently, if you have smaller equipment and you're not used to doing bigger trees, sometimes it can tie you up, because one thing goes wrong, it can tie you up for days. So say, for example, you do a big tree, you think it's a lot of money, but the circumference and the girth of the tree, believe it or not, there's a lot more tree. When you double and triple the size of the tree, there's a lot more work, a lot more weight to the tree, and it's going to tie you up longer, and the equipment, it's going to be harder on the equipment, harder on the men. So realistically, if you can do 2 or 3 small jobs and make more money than doing one big job. So the longer you do it, you'll figure this out. If you do a big tree job, say you do like a big tree job, say it's like $4,000 or $5,000. Most of your money is going to be spent on subbing it out on the crane, the grapple crane, and then subbing out, removing the material, and then subbing out a big stump grinder. And it's going to take a lot longer, a lot of times, than you think. Ties you up 2 or maybe even like 2 days to 3 days. You can actually do 2 or 3 small jobs a day, and if you add them all up and you figure out the profit, you're going to make more money doing the smaller jobs, and you're not going to have to sub it out because you can do most of it yourself. And a lot of times if you're doing smaller jobs, you can chip a lot of it. Whatever's left, you put it in a dump trailer and you dump it off at your office or wherever your headquarters is. And after the 3rd day, you basically have a pile of debris. You make a phone call, big loader truck comes, picks it all up at once, cleans the whole mess up. So like I said, a lot of times it's not the big jobs that pay. It seems like a lot of money